Tomorrow, John Kerry arrives in Beijing with hopes that North Korea's closest ally, the Chinese, can resolve the standoff over Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions and a seemingly imminent missile launch.
I think it's clear to everybody in the world that no country in the world has as close a relationship or as significant an impact on the DPRK than China. China has an enormous ability to help make a difference here.
NBC's Ian Williams is in Beijing. Ian, the question I have for you, John Kerry going to arrive there tomorrow, but is there any reasonable expectation he can move the needle with the Chinese?
Well, you know, Chris, in just a few short hours tomorrow, John Kerry will meet the Foreign Minister Wang Yi, Prime Minister Li Keqiang, and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, that's a pretty A-list group of people, and it shows the importance that China attaches to this. Now, the question, of course, is what China will do about it. There's absolutely no doubt there is enormous and growing frustration here, if not anger at Pyongyang, which has consistently ignored China, has consistently rebuffed Chinese efforts to tone down, to prevent these missile tests and previously nuclear tests. But what will China do? Now, clearly, John Kerry believes China has enormous leverage and will be pushing them for a start to live up to the sanctions which China itself signed up to recently. One of the key things will be to control the flow of illicit funds, of banking funds, across the Chinese border, which are processed in China. And also, Kerry will be pushing China to send a very firm message to Pyongyang that this behavior won't be tolerated. Now, we'll see what China does. There's no doubt, as I say, they are enormously frustrated by this. But in the past, they've been very reluctant to put too much pressure on North Korea for fear of destabilizing the regime and possibly of the place simply collapsing, Chris.
Ian Williams, live in Beijing. Thank you. And joining me now, Andrea Mitchell, who is now live in Seoul, and former Defense Secretary during the Clinton administration, William Cohen. Andrea, let's talk first about John Kerry. Pretty harsh words for North Korea about what comes next if they do fire this missile. Yeah. Tell us more.
Well, what he said today was that Kim Jong-un knows that he can't win this. And it's true, he's outmatched. He's got 800,000 troops, but we have a lot more firepower, if not manpower, on our side of the DMZ. That said, the first 24 hours would be brutal. That's the conventional wisdom, that army, that North Korean army, would march across the DMZ and into the south. And Seoul, right here where we are, 35 miles away from the DMZ, and the economic heartland of this country is, of course, vulnerable. He's got tactical weapons. He's threatened to use them. Most people believe, as does Kerry, I think, that this is bluster, but he's basically saying today that your rhetoric has gotten too hot. Take a way out. Find a glide path out of this, a face-saving way out of this. They're offering negotiations either direct with the U.S., direct with South Korea, or back to those six-party talks, which, frankly, have not gone anywhere.
And Secretary Cohen, I want to get your perspective on this. The Defense Intelligence Agency, they had an assessment that says for the first time, North Korea is now capable of delivering nuclear weapons in a missile. How concerning should this be in the broader context of what we're seeing going on there now?
Well, I think it's the shape of things to come because the North Koreans have been able to continue to violate the sanctions imposed by the United Nations. The other countries haven't been willing to impose enough hardship on the North Koreans to get their attention to say there's a better way for your people going forward. As a result of that, you're going to continue to see an evolution of capability, which will result in a missile being matched up with a nuclear warhead. It may take some more time. It could take years or less. But nonetheless, that's the inevitable result if this program continues. It's also a signal about what we're looking at in Iran, because Iran is seeking to do the same thing, to build a long-range missile and also have a nuclear warhead capability. So I think that this is something that needs to be addressed very firmly. I think that Secretary Kerry is sending the right message, and I hope that the Chinese can do whatever they can to influence the North Korean leader.
And Andrew, I want to bring you back in from the ground Chris, here live in Seoul. Absolutely,
I want to pick up
please.
on the question of China, because Bill Cohen knows more about China than almost anybody, and I'm really interested in what you were discussing, Chris, earlier with Ian Williams. Will the Chinese, this is a new leadership, will the Chinese really step up to the plate? They are believed to have the most leverage, but at the same time, U.S. officials here tell us that China does want to keep that buffer between American forces and China, which is North Korea, a friendly ally.
One of the challenges they face, Andrea, is that they're worried about destabilizing the North Korean regime, but they have to also worry that the North Korean regime is going to destabilize the entire region. That's not in their self-interest in going forward. So they have a Hobson's choice of such. They've got to try to diffuse the situation, and they can do that, it seems to me, by exercising more pressure on the economic relief that they provide the North Koreans, not to the point where the country collapses, but the signal is, look, you've been enjoying a guns and butter policy. You've developed the guns. We've been providing, we and other countries have been providing the butter. That has to stop if you're going to continue to destabilize the entire region, which is not in anyone's interest, especially the Chinese and the North Koreans.
And I want to get both of your perspective on this, because as the layman in this, I'm fascinated. Ian Williams said just a minute ago, Andrea and Secretary Cohen, that Secretary Kerry is meeting with the A-list of Chinese leaders. Is there anything we should draw from that? Secretary Cohen, why don't I start with you, and then we'll go to Andrea.
Yes. I just returned a few weeks ago from China, meeting with some of the top leaders as well. And what the Chinese want is a very strong relationship with the United States. It's very important to them. It's very important to us. And so this particular policy that's being pursued right now by the North Koreans of climbing up the rhetorical ladder and then sawing off the branches so that he can't climb down is very troubling to the Chinese, and it has a potential to cause a destabilization in the region. So they want a good relationship with the United States. That's the reason that Secretary Kerry is going to meet with their top leadership. And it's really important that he have this opportunity to convey our sentiments and hopefully secure some, at least, agreement that more has to be done. It'll be more subtle. It may take some time, but I think the Chinese do have a capacity to help influence, if not dictate, the outcome. I don't think they have that much influence they can dictate it, but they can surely influence it.
And Andrea, has there been expectation setting on the part of Secretary Kerry or the State Department more generally about what to expect when he hits the ground in Beijing? And to Secretary Cohen's point, what influence can he have either in the near term or the long term with China?
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of groundwork that goes into a meeting like this, but this is one case where I think Bill Cohen would agree with me. They really cannot predict how this new leader is going to respond and whether they're going to get what they want. They've seen some rhetorical movement on the Chinese side, but not enough, and certainly not the economic pressure that Secretary Cohen was talking about. And the other thing that's a little awkward here is that China was not happy with the rhetoric coming out of the White House about we're going to pivot toward Asia in this second term. More military muscle here. There are a lot of issues, territorial issues in the South China Sea, and we were siding with our allies. And they didn't like a lot of the pre-positioning that they saw. So here we are being given a perfect excuse for this military muscle in the region, which they consider their backyard, which it is, because of what North Korea is doing. So North Korea has stepped out of bounds in another way. They've given us an excuse to move in with the B-2 flyovers and the F-22s, and that's not something that China wants to see long term.
And Secretary Cohen, I want to end on you, which is the question Andrea and I have been talking about all week, and everyone's been talking about all week, which is this time with North Korea different? Do we have any way of knowing that?
I think it's different in the sense that you have a young, and I would say rather immature young leader who really doesn't have much worldly experience. And again, escalating the rhetoric to the point of threatening a nuclear attack upon the United States or our allies. When you engage in that kind of rhetoric, it becomes much more difficult to find a way down from the heights of that. And so I think that makes it different now that we see that they are becoming much more aggressive, at least rhetorically. They are developing more in terms of the testing of the third test of a nuclear weapon. They are going to be testing a longer range missile capability. So it's different because you've got a young leader who doesn't, I think, have the maturity to really understand how he is putting himself in the corner, making it very difficult to find a sensible and responsible way out.
Andrea, last word?
I agree entirely, and that is exactly what officials here are saying. I think Bill Cohen's experience does bear out that we don't know what to expect from this guy. And he's young, he's erratic, he's inexperienced, and that is a very dangerous combination for a miscalculation.
Andrea Mitchell, Bill Cohen, thank you both for your expertise.